I was halfway through stacking hay bales when I heard tires crunching down the gravel drive. At first, I thought it was a neighbor dropping by to check out the yard sale. It had been a quiet, breezy morning, and I just finished setting up a few folding tables near the barn. Nothing fancy, just old tools, horse tack, a couple wooden chairs, and a handmade sign nailed to the fence that read, "Ranch Yard Sale, 1 day only." We don't have big crowds out here, just folks who wave when they pass and stop to talk about fence posts and weather. But instead of a friendly wave, what I got was flashing lights and a voice through a megaphone. "Sir, step away from the setup. This is a violation of HOA Code 14B. I squinted. 2 patrol SUVs were parked at the bottom of my drive, completely blocking it. Behind them, a man in a stiff polo shirt and khakis stood puffing out his chest like a dollar store mall cop. He had an HOA badge clipped to his belt like it meant something. And beside him, 2 real deputies looked half embarrassed to even be there. One was already glancing around like he knew this was nonsense. I walked up slow, wiping my hands on my jeans. "What seems to be the problem, gentlemen?" HOA guy jumped in before the deputies could answer. "You can't run a commercial event on HOA-protected land. This ranch falls within our expanded zone. You didn't file a permit. This is an unauthorized sale." I almost laughed. "You think a few folding tables on private ranch land is a commercial event? I'm not exactly opening a shopping mall here." But he didn't blink. "You were warned in last month's notice. Any and all public-facing events must be approved by the board." Now, let's back up a second. This ranch has been in my family for over 40 years. It's 5 acres of wide sky, quiet mornings, and hard-earned peace. We've got cows, chickens, a fishing pond, and more land than their whole HOA neighborhood. Their little subdivision cropped up just down the hill a few years ago, and ever since, they've been trying to act like they run the whole county. At first, it was just letters. "Your fence doesn't meet aesthetic standards." Then, it was warnings about my barn lights being too bright. They even tried to tell me my rooster was a noise violation. A rooster on a ranch, in the middle of nowhere. You'd think I built a nightclub in their backyard the way they carried on. But this took the cake. Bringing cops to shut down a yard sale? It wasn't even a real event. Just me, my nephew, and a few neighbors who brought over some old farm tools. We weren't blasting music or taking credit cards. Just country folks talking under the sun. Try to clear out space in the garage. The officers didn't look like they wanted to be there, but they still asked me to take everything down. Said they were just enforcing what was reported. One even apologized under his breath. Meanwhile, cars started slowing down on the road, folks pulling over to see what was going on. A couple of regulars who had come for the sale turned right back around when they saw the patrol lights. I stood there, fists clenched, watching as the HOA guy strutted off like he'd just won a war. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just nodded, packed up the stuff, and waited for the dust to settle. But while I was stacking those chairs back into the shed, something clicked. If they thought this little power trip was the end of it, they were dead wrong. Because if they didn't want a quiet little yard sale on private land, they were about to learn what a real business looked like. I didn't need permission for that. Not on land that I own free and clear, and not in a county that knows the difference between overreach and freedom. And I already knew exactly what I was going to build right on the edge of the ranch, where the HOA patrol has to pass every morning. Long before the HOA rolled in with their clipboards and bylaws, this ranch was the kind of place folks came to breathe. Out here, the air's clean, the stars are bright, and no one tells you how tall your grass should be. My granddad built the fence himself, post by post, with nothing but sweat and stubbornness. The barn still creaks the same way it did when I was a kid feeding calves before school. It's the kind of land that teaches you patience and grit, and it had always been just that, ours. Then came the development. Some shiny real estate company bought the hill next to us, carved it up into tidy squares, and named the whole thing something like Whispering Oaks at Silver Valley. You know, the kind of name that makes you laugh, because there's not a single oak or valley in sight. The houses popped up fast, white fences, identical driveways, and little signs on every corner warning. This community is managed by the Whispering Oaks HOA. At first, we didn't think much of it. Let people live how they want. They stayed on their side of the road. We stayed on ours. But it wasn't long before the letters started. Folded neatly and stuck in my mailbox like invitations to a club I never asked to join. The first one was about my fence. Unapproved color and materials. Apparently, barbed wire and cedar logs didn't match their neighborhood aesthetic. I laughed and tossed in the fire pit. But more came. Visible tools in yard, unregistered farm equipment. Even one about excessive natural growth along the pond. Translation, wildflowers. Real scandalous stuff, right? Then came the so-called friendly visits. Some HOA board member in khakis would pull up to the gate and start taking pictures. Sometimes they didn't even ask permission. They'd just lean over the rail like they owned the place. One day, my wife caught a woman walking around our pasture, snapping photos of our chickens. Said she was documenting animal maintenance standards. I nearly choked on my coffee. It was around that time we learned they were trying to rezone the area. Their goal? Expand HOA oversight to include adjacent lots that impact the visual harmony of the community. In plain English, they want to control what we did with our land because our barn didn't match their white vinyl fences. We tried reasoning. I went to one of their meetings, stood there in dusty boots while they discussed the color of mulch and banned trampoline sizes. When I spoke up, their president, a guy named Rick with hair that didn't move, told me I should consider modernizing my property if I wanted to be a good neighbor. I told him he should consider minding his business. Still, they kept pushing. They filed noise complaints over the rooster, said my nephew's dirt bike was a disturbance, even sent a courtesy notice after we had a 4th of July cookout with some music and fireworks. Apparently, my American flag was too large. Can you believe that? It all became clear what they were doing. They weren't just trying to enforce some rules. They wanted to erase the ranch altogether, replace it with landscaping and lawn ornaments. Pretend this was just another square on their map. But they didn't understand what this land means. This ranch isn't some backyard to be judged on curb appeal. It's a living place. Animals, mud, sweat, sunburns, and freedom. It's where I taught my kids to fish, where we buried 3 generations of dogs under that old oak, and where no one, not some HOA handbook, gets to tell us how to live. So yeah, when they brought in the cops over a simple yard sale, it wasn't just petty. It was personal. They didn't just mess with tables and tools. They disrespected everything this place stands for. And when you do that, you better believe something's coming. Something they won't be able to shut down with a letter or a phone call. The yard sale wasn't some grand operation. It was just something simple I'd been meaning to do for months. We had tools collecting dust in the shed, old furniture that didn't fit anywhere anymore, and boxes of ranch gear we hadn't touched in years. I figured, why not lay it all out, throw up a sign at the main road, and let the locals come pick through it? Folks out here love a good bargain and a chance to chat. It's part of the rhythm of country life. I spent the whole week getting ready. Cleaned up the front of the barn, mowed the gravel path to make space for parking, even made lemonade to hand out in the sun. My nephew helped me drag out sawhorses and old saddles, and my wife printed up some flyers to hang at the feed store and gas station. Nothing fancy, just hand-drawn signs with arrows and a big, bold, Saturday only. We weren't charging admission or running ads, just inviting the neighbors to swing by. By sunrise that morning, the first few trucks had already started rolling in. I had a couple from 3 farms over pull up with coffee in hand, ready to browse. One lady asked about an old butter churn I didn't even remember owning. Another guy wanted to buy a pile of spare fencing wire. It was slow, quiet, and friendly, just how I'd pictured it. Kids were running around. People were laughing. One guy traded me a fresh pie for an old cast iron skillet. You couldn't script a better Saturday. Until the patrol cars showed up. It was like someone flipped a switch. The mood shifted in a snap. Blue and red lights lit up the gravel, and people stopped mid-conversation. I saw one of the HOA board members, Greg, the guy who once complained about my goats being too close to the property line, standing beside the officers like he was running the operation. He was waving a stack of papers like he'd just served a warrant. The sheriff's deputies weren't aggressive, but they were firm. said they received a report of an unauthorized commercial activity in an HOA-regulated area. They asked me to step aside while they assessed the situation. My nephew looked like he was about to say something, but I shook my head. I wasn't about to escalate it. Not yet. Greg walked up with his arms crossed. "We warned you," he said. "You were given notice. This is your second violation. You're technically operating a business." I could have reminded him that selling a few used tools and handing out lemonade doesn't exactly count as opening a Walmart. I could have pointed out that my ranch wasn't part of his little HOA subdivision and that their so-called extended authority hadn't been legally enforced. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at the barricade they created at the end of my drive, turning away car after car. They blocked it for nearly an hour. People who had shown up to browse couldn't even turn around without backing up down the dirt road. A few neighbors tried to vouch for me, but the officers just shook their heads, said it was above them. One of them kept glancing toward the HOA rep, like he didn't want to be there in the first place. By noon, the crowd had thinned. The tables were still full, but the laughter was gone. My wife stood by the lemonade cooler with her arms folded, just shaking her head. I packed everything up slowly, one item at a time. Not because I was defeated, but because I was thinking. They wanted to make an example out of me, to scare me into silence, to remind me that they were watching, always ready to pounce the second they saw something they didn't like. And if they thought this yard sale crossed a line, they had no idea what I was about to do next, because I wasn't going to sit back and wait for their next stunt. If they were so bothered by a few people gathering on my land for a sale, I was going to give them something they'd never forget, something louder, something permanent, something they'd have to drive past every single day. That evening, after the tables were folded and the last chair was dragged back into barn, I sat out on the porch with a cup of coffee in my hands and a storm brewing behind my eyes. The sun was setting low behind the trees, casting that golden light across the gravel, but I wasn't seeing any of it. I was staring straight across the road, at the HOA outpost they'd set up right at the subdivision entrance. A little prefab shack with their logo on it, a flagpole, and a smug little sign that read, "Community Standards Enforced." It had only gone up a few months earlier, and I had ignored it just like I had tried to ignore all their silly warnings and letters. But now, with the memory of flashing lights still burned into my brain, I wasn't just annoyed. I was done playing nice. I knew that they thought they had won, that they'd shut down the big, bad rancher and shown the whole neighborhood who was boss. But what they didn't know was that while I'm patient, I'm not passive. I don't take kindly to bullies, especially the kind that hide behind made-up rules and use law enforcement like pawns in their game. So as I sat there, watching their little HOA hut glowing under that street lamp, a wild idea popped into my head. Crazy at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If they hated a small yard sale that much, what would they do if something bigger opened up right under their noses? Something legal, something loud, and something that would make their so-called quiet neighborhood buzz with activity every single day? That's when it hit me, coffee. Not just a coffee cart or a folding table with a thermos. A proper, licensed, drive-thru coffee stand. The kind that opened early, stayed late, and had cars rolling through like a country morning parade. I already had the land. I had the frontage. I had the zoning. And best of all, I didn't need a single ounce of permission from their board to do it. The next morning, I called the county office. I asked all the right questions. Could I operate a small business on my land? Yes. Did I need permits? Yes, but only from the county. Did HOA rules apply? Not a chance. As long as I met health and safety standards and stayed within my land boundaries, I could sell lemonade, coffee, burgers, heck, even run a car wash if I wanted to. By the end of that week, I had a plan drawn out on a piece of graph paper, a budget scratched on a napkin, and a few local teens lined up for part-time work. I wasn't just doing this out of spite, though let's be honest, that was a big part of it. I was doing it because I'd had enough of being pushed around. If they wanted to treat me like a nuisance, I'd become their biggest headache and make some money while I was at it. I cleared a small patch of land just a few yards from their HOA shack, right by the road, where every commuter from the subdivision would have to pass. I made sure the view from their window would be nothing but steam, signage, and customers honking for lattes. And I named it something fitting: Ranch Grounds, coffee the way it should be. Supplies rolled in. I bought a used espresso machine from a cafe that had shut down 2 towns over. Built a simple wooden structure with a tin roof, all sourced from scrap lumber I had lying around. My wife painted the sign herself. Bold letters, bright colors, impossible to miss. And we added lights too, big, warm, glowing string lights that lit up the place like a summer fair. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing until the morning we opened. Just let the smell of fresh ground beans and sizzling breakfast burritos do the talking. And when the first car started pulling in, people from both the ranch side and the subdivision, I stood by the pickup window, smiling like I just won the lottery. Because in a way I had. The first customer rolled in just before 6 a.m. It was still dark out, a thin layer of dew glistening on the fence rails, and the air had that crisp bite that only comes before sunrise. A dusty pickup truck eased up to the service window, engine idling low. The driver leaned out and smiled. It was Hank, one of the ranchers from 2 roads over. He tipped his hat and said, "Heard you were up to something. Smells like good coffee." I handed him a steaming cup and a to-go cup with the Ranch Grounds logo stamped across it in big bold letters. Strong and black, just like the workday ahead, I said. He laughed, paid in cash, and promised to tell a few buddies. Within the next hour, 5 more cars came through. Then 10. By 8 a.m., there was a line stretching halfway down my gravel path and into the shoulder of the main road. Farmers, teachers, construction crews, even a couple of sleepy-eyed teenagers heading to school. Nobody cared that the place was built out of reclaimed barnwood. They just wanted something hot, something quick, and a friendly face to start the day with. I watched it all from behind the counter. Apron tied around my waist, sleeves rolled up, my nephew manned the espresso machine, while my wife handled the breakfast burrito orders. We had a rhythm going by day 2, fast, clean, and loud enough for the HOA folks across the street to hear the clatter of lids snapping onto cups and customers laughing in their trucks. And, oh, they noticed. By mid-morning, one of the HOA board members, Marla, parked her shiny SUV right across the road and stared from behind her tinted window. She didn't get out, just sat there like she was trying to mentally burn the building down. Later that afternoon, Greg, the same guy who brought the cops to my yard sale, walked up to the edge of my fence line, arms folded tight against his chest. "You can't do this," he called out. "This is an eyesore." I didn't even look up. Good coffee supposed to wake people up. Guess it's doing its job. He stood there for another minute, stewing, probably waiting for me to say something rude or lose my cool. But I didn't. I just poured another shot of espresso and turned the radio up a notch. Classic country, blaring through the speakers we'd mounted under the awning. The kind of music HOA rulebooks probably banned after page 5. That night, we didn't even have to advertise. Word already spread like wildfire through the county Facebook group and over local breakfast tables. Some folks were showing up just to see if the rumors were true. Coffee stand next to the HOA office? Really? And when they got here, they stayed. Got second cups. Took pictures, tagged us online. I even saw someone filming a TikTok with our handmade sign in the background. By day 3, we were running out of stock. I had to haul in more beans, more cups, more eggs and cheese from the store in town. The high schoolers I hired were asking for extra shifts. My nephew had started practicing latte art, and my wife was taking orders like a seasoned diner waitress. Somehow, in less than a week, we weren't just running a stand. We were running a community hub. But the best part? Every morning, without fail, the HOA patrol had to drive past our operation. They'd slow down, glare through their windows, sometimes even take photos. And every time they did, I'd wave. Sometimes they sent emails, sometimes official letters. Your business is causing excess traffic. Music is disrupting neighborhood harmony. Your sign violates aesthetic continuity. One of them even claimed the smell of coffee was too strong for early hours. I nearly framed that one. But every complaint hit a brick wall at the county office. My permits were solid. My taxes were paid. I was following every rule, just not theirs, and it drove them nuts. Still, we didn't gloat. We served. We smiled. We kept our little coffee haven open from sunup to sundown, and people kept coming, not just for the drinks, but for what it stood for. A little rebellion, a lot of heart, and a big no thanks to people who thought they could control everything they saw. By the end of the first week, Ranch Grounds was more than just a coffee stand. It had become a daily ritual. Folks didn't just swing by for a cup of joe. They came to swap stories, share local gossip, and enjoy a few minutes of freedom before their day kicked in. You could feel it in the air. People like seeing something real, something not stamped out of a rule book. And the more it grew, the more the HOA's frustration boiled over. Greg and his crew must have met 5 times that week alone. You could see them through the window of their little outpost, pacing and pointing across the street like generals in a battle they never planned for. I even caught them with a clipboard one morning, try and measure the noise level from our speaker, playing Waylon Jennings. They didn't come over again to talk. Probably realized talking hadn't worked last time. Instead, they went for paperwork. I got hit with 3 separate complaints within 2 days. One claimed I was operating in a sensitive residential zone. Another accused me of commercializing the rural landscape. The last one, my favorite, warned that persistent vehicle presence may disturb property values. That one made me laugh out loud. We're talking about 10 pickup trucks and a couple of dusty sedans, not a freeway. Still, I did my homework. Every letter I brought to the county office. Every warning I reviewed with a lawyer friend who owed me a favor. Each time, it came back the same. We were clean, no violations, no restrictions. My land was zoned for mixed use, and nothing I was doing fell under the HOA's jurisdiction. As far as the law was concerned, I could have opened a drive-thru petting zoo and still been in the clear. That didn't stop the HOA from trying other tactics. One morning, I arrived at the stand and found someone had knocked over 2 of our trash bins and poured oil in the gravel where customers parked. My wife wanted to call the sheriff right then, but I told her no. We cleaned it up ourselves, patched the gravel, and added a few motion lights near the parking area. 2 days later, a box of dead roses was left at our service window with a typed note that read, "This place doesn't belong here." Even then, I didn't flinch. I knew where this was coming from. Desperation. Control slipping through their fingers. The tighter they tried to hold on, the more folks realized how little power they actually had. Because while they were busy playing games, we were building something real. A local teacher started bringing her students coffee orders once a week. A church group asked if they could use our picnic tables for Sunday breakfast. One woman offered to paint a mural on the side of the stand, something with sunflowers and a longhorn. I said yes, of course. And something else started happening. People from inside the HOA community began showing up. At first, they came in secret. They'd park down the road, walk up with their hoods up, and whisper their orders like they were doing something illegal. But after a while, they stopped hiding. One guy came in wearing his HOA board polo shirt and ordered 2 large mochas and a croissant sandwich. I asked him if he was sure that wouldn't get him kicked out of their next meeting. He just smiled and said, "I'm not the only one who thinks they've gone too far." By that weekend, we had a small chalkboard set up near the pickup window that said, "Your coffee tastes better when it's brewed with freedom." People loved it. They'd take photos of the sign, tag their location, and leave comments like, Finally, someone stood up to the clipboard tyrants. The HOA was fuming, but their hands were tied. They couldn't shut us down, couldn't fine us, and couldn't stop the people from coming. They built a system of rules to control a neighborhood, but they never expected a coffee stand to unravel it one cappuccino at a time. It didn't take long before the HOA stopped pretending they weren't watching us. Every morning, their board members would shuffle into that little glass office across the street, coffee-less and grumpy, while my parking lot buzzed with life. We had regulars who showed up before sunrise just to chat, and by 7 a.m., there was always a line of pickup trucks stretching back to the road. The smell of fresh espresso drifted across the field like a dare, and every single time, the HOA tried to pretend it wasn't eating them alive. One morning, While I was helping a customer with a tray of 4 caramel lattes, I spotted Marla pacing outside the HOA hut on her phone. She wasn't just mad, she looked panicked. A few minutes later, Greg showed up in his car, parked facing us like some kind of sheriff in a spaghetti western, just watching. They weren't saying a word, but their eyes said everything. They'd lost control. I didn't wave this time. I just turned up the speaker and let Johnny Cash do the talking. That afternoon, a county inspector showed up. Not the usual guy. This one was young, fresh-faced, and clearly uncomfortable. He walked up to the window, holding a clipboard like a shield. "Hi, sir," he started. "I've had, multiple anonymous reports that this establishment may not be up to certain local health codes." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Mind showing me what they claim. He fumbled through the papers, flipping back and forth between vague complaints. Improper waste disposal, unlicensed food handling, maybe zoning confusion. I almost laughed. "You ever been here before?" I asked. He shook his head. I leaned out the window and pointed. "See that big green bin? That's county issued. Picked up twice a week. Food prep's done in a mobile certified kitchen I had inspected last month. And you want zoning? I've got the permit, hanging right there on the back wall." He followed my finger, squinted, and then just nodded. "Looks good. Sorry for the trouble. I think someone's trying to create a problem that doesn't exist." He left 10 minutes later with a free cinnamon roll in hand and told me he'd be back, but next time, just as a customer. Meanwhile, the HOA kept spiraling. They started handing out flyers to their residents. One of my customers handed me one. "Support local peace. Don't support unauthorized roadside businesses." It said in big, bold letters. I pinned it to our corkboard and wrote under it in red marker. "Guess we're official now." But the best moment came a week later. I was restocking the drink fridge when my nephew pointed out the window. "Hey, isn't that the sheriff?" Sure enough, it was Sheriff Hal. A big man with a soft voice and an unshakable sense of calm pulled into the lot and stepped out. He wasn't here for trouble. He was smiling. "Morning," he said, walking up to the counter. "Heard a lot about this place." I nodded. "Heard you've been getting calls about it." He chuckled. "Every day. HOA folks say you're causing chaos. Far as I can tell, all I see is coffee and smiles. What can I get you?" He looked up at the menu board, scratched his chin, then grinned. "Black coffee, extra large, and a breakfast wrap. I've got deputies trying to take my place in line back at the station." That was the moment everything shifted. The HOA might have had lawyers, letters, and petty complaints, but I had the public, the working folks, the neighbors, even the law. And once the sheriff gave us a stamp of approval, well, let's just say the HOA didn't have many moves left. Their members kept showing up one by one, eyes down, hoping no one noticed they were breaking their own boycott. Greg even came through once in a different truck, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. My nephew recognized him and handed him his drink with a smile. "Here you go, sir. No, HOA rules on receipt, promise." He didn't say a word, just took his coffee and drove off. By now, the coffee stand wasn't just a business. It was a symbol. Every burrito we served, every cup we poured, was another reminder that this land didn't belong to rule books. It belonged to the people who actually lived here. I never planned for it to grow the way it did. At first, ranch grounds was just my answer to their nonsense. A peaceful protest brew with beans and wrapped in bacon. But something strange happened the longer we kept those doors open. More people started asking how they could do the same. Not just customers, either. Other ranchers. Small landowners. Even folks who'd been silent during all the HOA drama began stopping by. Not just for caffeine, but for advice. How'd you get the permits? Where'd you buy your machine? Can I build something like this on my lot? One guy, Danny from 3 miles down, had a patch of land right off the highway. He asked if I'd help him set up a breakfast shack. Another, a retired couple, wanted to do weekend pies and lemonade out of an old horse trailer. The energy was contagious, and the more the HOA fumed, the more inspired people became. It wasn't just about coffee anymore. It was about taking back space, mental space, physical space, from the noise of control. Ranch grounds became proof that you didn't need to ask for permission to live your own life on your own land. You just needed courage and maybe a little caffeine. We added picnic tables under the oak tree out back. Families started bringing kids on Saturdays, and my wife organized a little craft booth for local makers to sell soaps, honey, and leatherwork. What started as a single stand had turned into something like a tiny country market, without the boards, the rules, or the artificial smiles. It was raw and honest and real. But the biggest surprise came one morning when an older man parked his bike out front and asked to speak with me. I stepped out, wiping my hands on a towel. He stuck out his hand and said, "Name's Walter. I was on the original HOA board." I froze for a second. He saw it and smiled. "Don't worry. I'm not here to argue. Just here to say, you're doing something important. I stepped down last year because I couldn't stomach what it became. It wasn't about protecting the neighborhood anymore. It turned into power and fear." We sat for a while at one of the picnic tables. He told me stories, how it started with good intentions, and how fast it turned, how a few voices made decisions for hundreds, how silence became the only way to survive without conflict, and how watching ranch grounds grow gave him hope that maybe, just maybe, things could change. That conversation lit a new fire in me. I started printing out resources, zoning guides, small business tips, county contacts. We kept a binder at the counter labeled DIY Freedom Projects. Anyone could flip through it, make copies, take notes. If I had the chance to help someone else stand up to the clipboard kings, I was going to take it. Then, almost quietly, something else happened. The HOA board started breaking apart. First, Greg resigned for personal reasons. No one clapped. Then Marla was voted out in a surprise recall. A young couple took their place. People who actually talked to neighbors, listened, and, get this, bought their morning coffee from us almost every day. One of them even joked, "We should have had you on the board years ago." I wasn't interested in joining any board, but I was more than happy to help reshape the way people around here thought about power. And it started simple, by serving it up in a paper cup. Week after week, the line at ranch ground stayed steady. The music played, the fryers sizzled, and the conversations never stopped. Folks who never spoke much before were suddenly meeting at our tables, sharing ideas, laughing again. And the HOA office? Well, let's just say it got quieter by the day. No more patrols with cameras. No more passive-aggressive mail. Just the occasional glance from the few who still thought they could control the world with fine print. But by then, even they had stopped fighting it. Because deep down, everyone could see what was happening. Ranch grounds wasn't just about coffee. It was about community. It was about pushing back when someone tried to box you in. And it was about doing it with warmth, grit, and a whole lot of espresso.